The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 4, Day 1. The next afternoon seemed to take weeks to arrive. Poppy was so excited she couldn't sit still. Instead of sleeping Thursday night, she spent most of it scrapbooking. She wanted so badly to tell someone about what was going on with Branch. She shared everything with her friends. But Poppy had promised not to say a word to anyone, and breaking Branch's trust would not be a good way to start their new friendship. So the pretty pink troll improvised by scrapbooking about it. A short little story of how she told the whole snack pack about her plan and invited them to come along. They were happy to go, and as enthusiastic as her about helping Branch. He welcomed the extra guests, and together they all played games and sang and danced and hugged, and Branch had a wonderfully fun time with them, and he became best friends with the whole gang. Sure, it was only wishful thinking, completely unrealistic in every way, but there was no harm in writing a sweet little fairy tale. Maybe someday it'll actually happen. Branch couldn't sit still or sleep either, but excitement wasn't the word that came to mind. Panic more so. His brain raged with a dozen possibilities as to how this day could go. From him getting so fed up he tells Poppy to buzz off and then hating himself for doing so, to her bringing a friend or 2 or 20 along and dreading the unbearable consequences of that, all the way to them sitting contentedly in the grass, as he gazed at her pretty, white-freckled, soft pink face, and listened to her cute, giddy laugh all afternoon. His head, his heart, his stomach, everything was spinning. After tending to her princess duties, Poppy made an excuse about going for a solo hike to collect flowers. She used to do that every once in a while, and then instead happily skipped over to visit her new friend. Down in his bunker, Branch nearly jumped out of his skin when several knocks sounded on the door above, followed by a very cheerful, "Hey, new best friend! I'm here, ready for our first amazing afternoon of hanging out. Let me in." His stomach flipped upside down. His heart was telling him to go over and open the door, while his mind was telling him to run and hide, which resulted in him dumbly standing there like a statue. This morning he couldn't stop fidgeting and pacing. And now, here he was, trying to move in some way, but was rendered completely frozen. A louder sequence of knocks and another sing-song shout from the princess snapped Branch out of it. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself over to the elevator. Every footstep took extreme effort, as if there were weights tied to his ankles. Finally reaching the top of the shaft, he instantly whipped the hatch door open, so as to not offer himself any opportunity to change his mind about this. For a few slow-motion seconds, the ice in Branch's heart melted away as he stared up at Princess Poppy. A single ray of sunlight had escaped the cloudy sky and was shining down on her, making her already heavenly features glow like an angel's. "There you are! Geez, took you long enough. I thought I was going to have to break in." Branch's crankiness flooded back in as he snapped himself out of his daze. "First of all, you would have never been able to break through my heavily fortified defense system. Secondly, there's this little thing called patience. You should try it sometime."
"Well, maybe you can teach me about it someday. But for now," Poppy jumped down into the opening, landing right beside Branch. "Why don't you show me around your bunker? I've always wondered what it's like down here."
Branch took a couple of steps away. Poppy may not care about personal space, but he sure did. "What's my bunker like? Well, to me, it's silent, private, and well organized. Which means to you, it will be gloomy and boring. There, tour's complete."
"Hey, I'm willing to give it a chance. I know it won't be as bright and exciting as what I'm used to, but that doesn't mean it will be boring. Just different. Besides, this is about us spending time together in a calm, quiet, and gradual way. Remember? Bring it on."
Unsure of what words to say and in what tone, his response was simply to an abrupt pull on the lever. Poppy bounced happily as the elevator began to descend, still going on and on about how thrilled she was to finally see his home.
I want to see everything. Don't leave anything out.
Just do me a favour and don't touch anything, Branch warned. If I wanted people interacting with my personal belongings, I wouldn't have locked them in an impenetrable bunker.
Arriving in the main room, Poppy gazed around, taking in every detail. There wasn't a single colourful thing in the entire area. It was quite dark, despite the little glowing yellow mushrooms scattered around, and it took a minute for her eyes to fully adjust. There were dozens of varying shelves built into the walls, all very neatly stocked, and 2 dull brown bookshelves. The tables were made of plain beige wood, and the couch was a pale olive green, and it was a 2-seater. If you are the only one who's ever down here, why do you have a couch that fits 2 people?
Really? That's the first thing you point out?
Well, it's an understandable question, isn't it?
Branch rolled his eyes with a sigh and began walking away from her. More room to stretch out my legs. Just because I'm alone and miserable doesn't mean I can't at least be comfortable.
That made sense. To be honest, this couch did look quite cosy. Poppy trailed along behind him, staring at him expectantly, so Branch began pointing out random things they passed, giving very lazy explanations.
My building supplies. You saw my emergency supplies on the way down through the elevator. There's enough to last me 10 years. My table, my chair, my books, my sort of dining room. Kitchen is around the corner. You were already introduced to my couch. More books, more supplies. That's about it. Hooray.
What do you need all these supplies for?
Branch deadpanned at her clueless question. I don't know. In case of an emergency.
Poppy didn't feel like wasting time trying to pry after a proper answer, so she shrugged.
I guess it never hurts to have extra supplies. You'll definitely never run out of anything. That's kind of cool.
He continued his ice-cold tone.
Indeed. So, was this tour everything you dreamed it would be?
Pretty much, except it's a lot roomier and tidier than I was expecting. Could use some colour and decorations and some light background music, but it suits you.
Thanks. Branch increased his sarcasm even more. That's kind of the idea.
Walking over to the nearest bookshelf, Poppy chose a random book and opened it up.
Did I or didn't I mention about not touching anything?
Poppy rolled her eyes.
It's only a book.
But put it away anyway. She didn't want to get annoyed at him after less than 3 minutes, but he was making things needlessly difficult again. She settled her hands on her hips and inquired,
So, if I can't touch anything, and there's nothing else you're willing to show me, what exactly are we supposed to do here, huh? Stare at the wall? Or stare at the ceiling? Unless I'm not allowed to look at anything either.
Branch hated to admit it, but his guest had a point. He hadn't wanted the inquisitive princess to mess up his meticulous organization, or set up some defense mechanism that would be a pain to reset. But his main fear was that she could discover something humiliating, such as his collection of her invitation, which was right over behind those flimsy brown curtains. Of all the things that had frantically run through his head earlier, he wished that finding a better hiding place for those cards had been one of them.
This is going well, Branch grumbled internally. I really have no idea why I was expecting it to go better than this. Maybe she'll finally realise how pointless it is to be around me. Then she'll finally give up on me. Then I can go back to being heartbroken in solitude. Well, this whole hanging out thing was your plan. So what is your brilliant suggestion?
Let's go for a hike, round the outskirts of the village. We can get some fresh air, space from everyone else, and if there are some supplies or anything you need to gather, we can get them along the way. How about that, Branch? Sounds good?
Sounds like a typical day for him, with the added bonus of having a certain someone by his side.
Sure, whatever,
Branch mumbled, glancing off to the side. He heard a joyful little squeal, and the next thing he knew, There were 2 pink arms reaching towards him. Instinctively, he sprang back. Poppy stopped in her tracks, then retreated her arms behind her back.
Right, sorry, no hugs. Bad habit.
After a moment, she hopped merrily over to the elevator.
Come on, we're wasting valuable time. Let's hustle.
Not bothering to hurry, Branch fetched his backpack and dragged himself over to the elevator. The 2 of them were the definition of opposite as they travelled through the forest. Poppy was skipping and dancing along, humming uplifting tunes, pausing every now and then to admire some pretty flowers or cute animal or neat rock, a smile never leaving her face. Branch was trudging along in complete silence, as rigid as a robot, stony eyes staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. Every now and then Poppy made some comment about how nice the day was, or how pretty the flowers were, or how happy she was, or how much she loved scrapbooking. Branch ignored her and focused on scanning for useful items and potential dangers. As Poppy began some funny thing about what happened at some party, Branch spotted something off the trail. Some uncommon but important medicinal berries. Poppy was still blabbering away.
We couldn't believe that worked. So then Fuzzbird... Hey, where are you going?
Branch had taken a sudden turn right off the path, heading straight through the bush. He didn't offer any kind of explanation, so she just hurried after him. When he reached the dark green bush, he pulled out a cardboard container, kneeling onto the grassy ground, and began carefully picking the berries. After she finished blundering through the vegetation, Poppy appeared at his side, hovering over his shoulder as she bombarded him with questions.
What are you doing? Oh, what are those? What are they for? Can I help?
Branch almost blurted out a no out of habit, but the whole idea of today was to interact with Poppy, not go about his business acting like she didn't exist. Besides, she would never stop pestering about it, so he may as well save the aggravation. Go for it. He tossed her a matching container. Make sure they look like this, ripe but not too dark, and don't crush them or they won't be any good. Poppy nodded vigorously and moved a few troll lengths over to a neighbouring bush. For a while they sorted through the berries in silence, Branch staring at the bushes for as long as he could, until his eyes finally gave in to the temptation and drifted over to her. She was humming again, nodding and swaying her head to the rhythm of her own tune, causing her fluffy, dark magenta ponytail to bounce slightly. He returned to his work before he could think further about how cute she looked. Branch's container was less than 3/4 full when the princess came hopping over to him, apparently done. Her container was indeed full, but considering her carefree attitude, he was prepared to have to sort through a bunch of unripe, dark and or squished berries.
Are these okay?
Poppy inquired hopefully, taking the container from her. Branch looked over its contents to discover she actually did very well. He only found one berry that was a bit damaged and tossed it out. Looks good. Poppy knew that any genuine praise, however light, was extremely rare coming from Branch, so she was very pleased.
What else can I help you with? Anything else to collect? There's bound to be something else you need to do, right?
Branch couldn't believe how exhilarated she was over something as tedious as gathering supplies. She wasn't faking it or exaggerating. He had experienced those before, such as when he tried to advise her of safety precautions in the past. And now that Poppy had proved she was capable of following his instructions, he felt more confident in letting her help. I could use some oak twigs. There should be some up this hill. As they packed up the berries and headed for the nearby hill, Poppy automatically asked Branch why he needed the oak twigs. She didn't really expect an answer, considering all the previous one-sided conversations, so she was a bit shocked to hear his voice. They make good binding, strong and durable. It wasn't even that grumpy. On top of the hill, Branch described exactly what they were looking for. It was Poppy who located them, and they each gathered an armful. From there they moved on to gathering some dry sticks for firewood, extracting medicinal sap from certain pine trees, and collecting various edible herbs. To be honest, Branch didn't really require any of those last 3 items. But he was starting to enjoy the Pink Princess's presence, and was subconsciously searching for ways to keep her interest on him.
Not that I care if she's paying any attention to me, Branch stubbornly told himself. One can never have too many overstocked supplies, and an extra pair of hands has been effective at gathering them.
Poppy's enthusiastic energy made her swift but not careless. She took on every task with an unwavering smile and learned fast. To him, they were just bland jobs that needed to be done. But to her, it was yet another fun way to spend yet another wonderful day. Her positive attitude proved to be mildly contagious. Branch's heart, which constantly felt like it was being weighed down by rocks, actually felt a bit lighter now, as if a couple of those rocks had been lifted. He couldn't wrap his head around Poppy's natural ability to be so optimistic all the time about everything, but also made him a bit nervous. He only wished he could have that kind of outlook on life. Hug time passed once during their visit. Poppy had noticed Branch tense at the ting of her flowering mauve bracelet, but she had managed to resist the urge to hug him. Instead, she hugged herself, and then noticed a friendly rabbit passing by and gave it a hug too. Finally, Poppy announced, "Well, Branch, you've done really well putting up with me for over an hour, so we'll call it a day." I know what you're thinking. What a relief, she's finally leaving. Instead, Branch felt more towards the opposite. His moment of relief came when she followed up with, "But this isn't the last time you'll see me. You have a 2-day break, but then I'll be back on Monday." When Poppy went out on a limb and suggested walking with Branch back to his bunker, his response surprised her. "Sure, I guess. Whatever." She was impressed by how much progress the grey troll had made in such a short period of time. She had managed to get some brief, casual sentences out of him here and there. That was still an improvement from the cold silence or stinging sarcasm. He appeared more relaxed. His arms hung loosely at his sides. He stood straighter, and his hands weren't clenched into fists. Halfway to his bunker, he even started a conversation.
"How's your arm?"
Albeit in a monotone voice, without looking at her, but progress is progress, no matter how tiny. "Oh, it's feeling much better. Thanks for asking. And thank you again for helping me. That was so kind of you." Branch merely nodded, but it was still a significant reaction coming from him, so Poppy continued on with how she's taking care of it as he instructed. The ointment is stinging less, and it's healing up well, etc. But then she added about how Creek had been helping her change the bandages. Branch immediately stiffened at the mention of that troll. Naturally, he was jealous of Creek's closeness to Poppy. But it wasn't only that. The way that hairball walked around with his head held high and a smug grin on his face, behaving like he was the most special creature in the entire forest with his cheesy fake charm. Even worse, he always went out of his way to mock Branch, making dismissive comments about his caution and passive-aggressive jokes about his lack of positivity. Branch hadn't had the slightest idea what Poppy saw in Creek. Not that it mattered. Whether she loved or loathed that purple and turquoise troll, it wouldn't change the fact that she'd never have any feelings for Branch. Thankfully, she didn't mention anything more about Creek, but Branch could still taste some irritation rising into his throat. Poppy noticed that her companion had become a bit tense again, unaware of what was going on in Branch's head and heart. She assumed the reason for this change was that he was worn out from today, and was ready to head back to the security of his bunker. Arriving there, Poppy bid him farewell, reminding him that she would meet him here again on Monday afternoon. Branch responded with a neutral nod, not interested in revealing any of the many emotions inside him. Then the princess added, "Since you aren't a fan of hugs, how about a high five to end the day?" She held up her little pink hand. Branch crossed his arms stubbornly.
"I don't do high fives either."
"Oh, come on, just one little high five."
"Not going to happen."
"It's just a high five.
don't care.
Pretty please, I'm asking nicely.
And I'm saying no.
Oh, fine.
Poppy reminded herself that nagging him wasn't the way to work things out with him.
We'll come back to that at a later date. Bye, Branch. Have a great evening.
She skipped off towards the village, leaving Branch staring after her. He must have stood there for a solid 5 minutes before retreating back into his bunker. For the entire evening, he thought about his time with Poppy, mentally replaying each moment in slow motion. As he cleaned up after dinner, he said aloud,
"It didn't go terribly."
Sure, it had a rocky start, but had smoothed out relatively quickly. Branch had gotten more supplies for his emergency rations while spending a whole hour with the Princess Poppy in casual environment, without any interruptions. He dared to allow himself to believe it had actually been nice. Branch didn't want a single second to fade from his memory, so he reached out for a blank chestnut-brown journal from the shelf and a pencil from the table, and then settled onto the couch. He spent the rest of the evening writing out every detail, starting all the way back from when she gave him the box of leftover treats. He ended up with nearly 6 pages. Afterward, Branch headed past his dining table to the loosely curtained shelves where he stored the invitations. Since Poppy would be entering his bunker on a regular basis now, he gathered them up to find a more secure place to keep them. He relocated items in his bedroom until he made enough shelf space for all of them, shelves that were protected by actual doors. He looked over each card before gently placing it. Branch set the new journal nearby, beside an older one that was green with grey stitches. That one was nearly full, containing nearly 3 dozen pages of poetic rambles and random incidental entries about Princess Poppy. He glimpsed at it, but left it where it was. He'd dealt with more than enough emotions for one day. Princess Poppy spent the weekend with all of her best friends. On Saturday, she attended several festivals with Creek, Biggie, Smidge, Guy Diamond, Satin, Chenille, Cooper, DJ Suki, and Fuzzbert. Then on Sunday, she hung out with just Creek for most of the afternoon through to the evening. She had been hoping to spend the entire day with him, but she had some rather important duties to attend to in the morning with her father, King Peppy. Unfortunately, Creek had gotten upset over this arrangement.
"Come on now, Princess. You and I haven't had any quality time together in weeks. I thought you said you wanted today to be our day."
There was a slight hint of a whine in his voice, and a slight pout on his light purple lips.
"I know, and I do, but I can't reschedule this time, and my dad really needs my assistance. I'm really sorry."
Poppy hated seeing her closest friend upset, especially when she was the cause.
"It will only take a couple of hours, and the rest of the day will be 110% about you and I. I promise."
Creek let out a long sigh.
"Well, all right. I understand. You have more important things to do than spend time with me."
He wandered off with his head hung low.
"Spending time with you is very important to me. I'll meet you at the park an hour past noon,"
Poppy called after him. He didn't respond. As always, she felt guilty about hurting Creek's feelings, and couldn't stand the idea of him speculating that she didn't care about him. He meant more to her than any other troll. But being princess meant she had to take care of the village above everything else, and she couldn't decline a direct order from her elderly father, who also happened to be the king. But Poppy wasn't too worried. This was just Creek's way, and by the end of the day, they would be back on perfect terms again. Sure enough, when she showed up to the park, managing to leave her father a bit early, she was relieved to see a huge smile spread across Creek's handsome face. Poppy jumped into his arms, and he spun her around, telling her how pleased he was that she could finally join him. She blushed a little at his charming smile and affectionate gesture, and then he took her hand and they headed off. By the end of the day, when they said good night, he picked her some flowers, and gave her a tiny kiss on her freckled cheek. The young princess danced and twirled her way back to her pod, singing a happy little love song. Creek was so sweet and fun, and always made her heart as light as a feather. No matter how stressful or frightening or upsetting a situation got, he was always able to remain calm and controlled. Though they weren't an official couple, most of the village assumed they would be someday. He really liked her, and she really liked him. But neither were ready for a committed relationship, so their status as very close friends was comfortable for both of them. Plus, as future queen, Poppy's main concern had to be adjusting her increasing royal duties. Once that happened, then perhaps she could slowly start to think about having a real relationship with Creek. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. I like that chapter, I really do. Branch is slowly but surely helping out, and he's feeling it, he's feeling warmer because of her. But it's not a I can fix him mentality. It's more the fact that she's helping him heal, which I appreciate. I hate the I can fix him mentality of stories, which is why I have a bit of a gripe with Beauty and the Beast, because I like the guy being inspired to change by the girl, but not that the girl is trying to, fix him. Poppy is at this point, but she also is being genuine. She does want him to be happy. Yes, it's the wrong type of happy so far, but she's getting there, and I appreciate that. And one thing here, Creek's guilt trip. Oh my god, that is textbook toxic, sidling into a relationship, manipulative behaviour. I hate that. She's got important stuff going on, dude. You are not the highest thing in the forest. You're only 2 inches tall. I'm sorry. This guy creeps me out, and it's not only because he's voiced by Russell Brand. Ugh. And I've changed Poppy's voice a bit, because the high voice I used in the first 2 chapters is just not sustainable for a long time. I've still tried to give her a slight squeak to it a little bit, but I've done it more gentle. I know her voice is deeper in the movies, and it might be easier to do that, but I wanted to verbally show their oppositeness, with him being low and gruff and her being high and sweet. Honestly, she's Pinkie Pie in another universe. I am halfway convinced, I really am. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.